Hey everybody, welcome back. This is the second lecture directed reading of book two of Plato's Republic. Um, we're gonna we're gonna jump to page 64. So go ahead and turn there. Um, Now, given everything that we've talked about and everything we learned from book one, and the opening movements of book two, and the um, you know Socrates' friends basically saying, we want to sort of think what you think, in as much as that justice is some highest good, right? Because we talked about the sort of three different types of good, and we want to put justice in that highest category. And we saw the sort of difficulties of proving that or convincing people of that, in that uh, we have both the history of the world and sort of honest, if you will, psychological evaluation of people and their motives, and we've talked about the Ring of Gyges, and also the way that we're popularly or commonly um, habituated in society to sort of seek rewards, whether that's in this life, or religiously or metaphysically, in terms of the life to come. And although they don't specifically talk about it per se, it could be, again, the sort of karmic idea. You're doing the right thing so that the right thing comes to you, something like that. But we're jumping ahead, page 64. Drop down a paragraph, and we see this. Well, I think all of you are pressing for an inquiry that is by no means an easy undertaking. We must keep our wits about us, and since our wits are not always sharp, we should do well to adopt a method of examination similar to that used when people without very keen vision are required to read small letters from a distance. This method would draw their attention to the same letters writ large, and I think they would count it a godsend if they could read the larger letters first, then check the smaller letters against them to see if they correspond. So we're going to continue on with this Socratic dialectical investigation of justice. However, there's going to be a few changes. Um, and one is that they use the example of like an eye examination. That's what we just read. And that is, if you think about an eye examination, you're at a certain distance, and you're reading letters that are, you know, um, getting smaller, all right, and they're difficult to see. And what he's getting at here is, it would be great if we could check these smaller letters against the larger letters, or larger, versions of them, so that we can see if we've like got it right. Which is all to say that um, what they've been thinking about justice as it relates to a just individual, a just person, but it's kind of like a small letter, right? It's a small j justice. And he thinks that perhaps it might be more useful to look at it societally, socially, justice as it is present or absent, perhaps, in a society. So like the larger letter, right? And if we carried this through, metaphysically, as we see, later in the text. Now, this would be capital J justice as it exists as an idea in of itself. But for now, the idea is to transition from just thinking about justice as it relates to me or to you or to a specific person, to it in a larger sense of existing within society. So they're going to start talking about the city. So drop down to the bottom of the page. Um, you see about 6 or 7 lines from the bottom. He says, very well, a city or a state, the polis, is a response to human needs. No human being is self sufficient, and all of us have many wants. Can we discover the origin of the state and any other explanation? This is a very basic understanding or definition of a city or a state. We might say a nation today, but just the idea of like a group of people that are living together with, a political, dimension of life, and the way that group of people dwelling in that place sort of, are able to live together, and that people come to live together in a city or a state. He says here, because they're not self-sufficient, and we all have needs, we all have wants, and by living together, we help each other to meet those needs and those wants, right? So we're proceeding from that, and so on page 65, um, it goes like this. I'll actually start at the bottom of 64. He says, since each person has many wants, many partners and purveyors will be required to furnish them. One person will turn to another to supply a particular want, and for a different want or need, he will seek out still another. Owing to this interchange of services, a multitude of persons will gather and dwell together in what we have come to call the city or the state. And again, the Greek term is polis. Right. And so one man trades with another, each assuming a benefits therefrom. Right. Come then, let us construct a city beginning with its origins, keeping in mind that the origin of every real city is human necessity. Now, this means that they're sort of moving into like an imaginative project. All right, let's imagine that we're going to imagine the just city, right? Starting with the very basics, like what do you need? How does it work? So if you've ever thought about, the state of the world, the state of the society that you live in, and there's things about it that you liked or didn't like, and you wondered if you could do it, better. What would it look like? They're just starting with like the very basics. What do you need just to have a society that can function, in as much as its function is to meet the needs of everybody that lives in that society? So they go on. Let's see. Now the first, and again we're on page 65. Now the first and greatest necessity on which our very life depends is food, certainly. Next is a place in which to live. Third, clothing and the like. Yes, then we must ask how our city will provide these things. A farmer will be needed, a builder, a weaver. I suppose we should add a shoemaker and still others who care for the needs of the body, so a doctor. And so they work through the basic things of life, food and shelter and clothing and that sort of thing, right? I think that's all very easy to understand. What it gets interesting because at the bottom of the page they're going to ask the question, will it be better if everybody provides these things for themselves, right? They're self-sufficient, self-reliant. Or is it better if everybody has a particular role or function within society that contributes to everyone else's needs or wants? Now, if you just remember, on the other page, we read that because no one is self-sufficient, we come together to live in a city. And they also see it as very sort of inelegant or very impractical if everybody's trying to build their own house and make their own clothes and grow their own food and all that kind of stuff. That it's probably better if, based off of your, let's say, talents, whatever it is that you happen to be, good at, and the city is in need of it, that's sort of the role that you play within society. And of course, this might be very challenging for us to accept because we live in an individualistic society in which our views about self-expression and our views about freedom to do what we want. You have the hobbies that you want, right? There's like the not terribly important stuff in some sense, but then the other stuff, like you go to school and you major in what you want to major in, and you get a job in the field that you want to get a job in, hopefully, and that this is offering a sort of philosophy of the city, if you will, that is saying it's probably not up to us to just do what we want on one hand, or to just try to do everything ourselves, but that we're in it together, and that we should probably like correlate or fashion our lives around, in part, in a sort of significant, maybe essential sense, the role that we play within that society as is best for society, and not in the most direct sense what we think is in our own interest. And this goes back to some of the things that they've been saying about justice all along, is if it's from the get-go self-interested, like that Thrasymachon definition of justice, that's not really serving the city better and the people in that city better. And then the result is that it ends up not serving us well. But if we, on the other hand, do have a sense of justice, if we do have like the sensibilities, the scruples, whatever, empathy maybe, in which we are sort of putting the city first, the state first, and the people in that comprise the city or the state, then it probably will actually be more in our self interest in that sense of justice. Okay. Um, so they make the decision early on, and this is at the bottom of page 65. There is a diversity of talents among men, among everyone, and consequently, one man is best suited to one particular occupation, another to another. Right. So this is a principle that they're going to proceed with, is that everybody has a part to play, and it's sort of particular to their allotment of gifts and abilities, right? So let's see here. They expand the list a little bit to include additional people in the city. This is on page 66. Meaning, like, if everybody's just going to have one job, then whoever makes houses probably shouldn't be felling the lumber, and they shouldn't be making the nails, right? Because those are jobs too. And so basically, to meet these necessary primary needs of the city, we're going to need like sort of subsequent vocations or professions to allow for those things to be. And so things sort of get more specialized or playing these support roles so that everybody can do what it is that they're supposed to do and not have to do other things, right? So people that make clothes don't necessarily have to go and get the raw materials to make the clothes and then weave them into fabrics or whatever, and so on and so forth with every other profession. So they decide that it's inefficient for people to sell their own goods. This is happening at the bottom of 66 and the top of 67, that they're probably going to have to set up markets so that people can make whatever it is that they make, produce the things that they produce, or provide whatever services they provide. But we can set up a marketplace so that people can come to that and get it when they need it, right? And it's probably also inefficient to attempt to just exchange directly goods and services for other goods and services. And so they invent a medium of exchange, and that's money. And so money then is a way in which we get the things that we need in society, right? It's not at its foundation, or as a phenomenon, if you will. It's not there specifically to enrich people for the sake of more luxury or power, but it's really just sort of serving as a means of exchange so that you can get the things that you need, right? And that's, while we all maybe know that on some level, the way that we actually view money is like something that is in of itself valuable, like the way that they want to talk about justice, and that might perhaps be an inappropriate or maybe even corrupt view of what money is. And because we view it so and think about it so, it ends up playing such a dominating role in our life. And Socrates in many of the dialogues, demonstrates that our attitudes about money, and this is going back to the ancient world, this is going back 2,500 years ago, that it's already sort of causing problems in people's lives in terms of getting their their value system sort of off kilter, and people are worrying about certain things as a result of that, and not just money itself, but everything that goes along with it, how one lives their life, and what they make time for and who they make time for and stuff like that, ends up really throwing a wrench in things, right? So it's sort of important for Socrates to make sure that it's serving money as a medium of exchange is just really just doing the thing that it's supposed to be doing. But let's move on. So they reemphasize at the bottom of 67 that they are looking for the origin or the definition for justice and injustice, and that that it's probably going to be somewhere to be found in the mutual needs of the city's inhabitants, which is sort of like saying we'll sort of an initial suspicion or speculation is we'll probably find justice when all of the needs are being met, and that we will probably find injustice when all of the needs are not being met, right? And I think that that's as relevant today as it ever was, right? But let's go to page 68. Starting at the bottom of 67, he says, first then, let us consider the way of life of the people of the city that we've just described. So the city that just has these basic professions and sort of auxiliary professions that provide for the meeting of these needs. Like what does that society look like that we've just imagined? He says, won't they make bread, wine, clothes, shoes, and houses too? They'll work in the summer for the most part without clothes or shoes, right? Because it's hot. It's August now, so I'm sure we all get that. But in the winter, they'll want to wear both. They will grind meal from barley and flour from wheat. Then they'll knead and bake cakes and loaves of fine quality and serve them on mats or reeds on clean leaves. When they eat, they'll recline on beds fashioned of yew or myrtle. They and their children feasting together and drinking their wine. All will wear garlands, singing hymns to the gods and enjoying one another's company. But they'll take care not to produce too many children in order not to run the risk of poverty or war. So, it's a very sort of idyllic existence, right? We do all the things that we're supposed to do. We work, throughout the year, making sure that we have everything that we need. And then we come together and we, as a society, and we share our meals in common. And, there's repose and there's singing, right? And, we're wearing garlands and all this really wonderful stuff, right? But Socrates' friends break in, Glaucon in particular. He says, but you provided no relish for the feast. Where's where's the good stuff, right? Like, that's all nice, but where's the other stuff? And he says, true, I've forgotten. Relish there must be salt, of course, olives, cheese, boiled roots and herbs of the sort that country people prepare. For dessert, they'll have figs, chickpeas, and beans. They'll roast myrtle berries and acorns in the fire, all the while drinking in moderation. Living this way in peace and health, they can probably expect to reach old age and pass on the same life to their children. Now, this, you'll want to, again, hopefully you're taking notes on all of this and underlining stuff and annotating your text. This city that they've described is oftentimes called the city of necessity or the city of pigs, right? And it's in many ways a utopian society, right? Everybody's has what they need. Everyone seems at peace, right, and fulfilled. But there's a little bit of a wrinkle here, right? So let's look. But this is fair for a city of pigs, Socrates. So meaning in the sense, not really what humans want. It's not quite up to what we want. So not pig in the sense of hoggish or overly consumptive and dirty or anything like that. Which no judgment against pigs, right? But that's just maybe what some people think of it. Here it's just being used to mean not fully human, or at least what has come to mean human. Would you provide nothing else? And so Socrates says, well, what do you suggest, Glaucon? He says, the usual things. If people are not to be uncomfortable, how about couches, right? We didn't have that in our city of necessity. How about tables, sauces, sweetmeats? He goes, oh, I understand what you mean now. if we're to consider the origins not simply of a city as such, but of a luxurious city, so now we go from the city of necessity, right, sort of demeaningly referred to as the city of pigs, now talking about the luxurious city, right, or the feverish city is how it's sort of described. He says, your suggestion is probably a good one because it is in the luxurious city that we are more likely to discover the roots of justice and injustice, meaning something like, we've described a city in which everyone has their needs met, but it's somewhat unrealistic in some regards. We'll talk about that more in just a second. But also, it's improbable that injustice will show up there because everyone's getting what they need. So it's one could make the argument that the Republic, this text, and if the Republic stands for like the ideal city, the just city, that in some ways the book could be over right now, right? And some of you are like, well, man, that would be great. but again, because it's so bare bones, because it's so simple and frugal, that his friends, Glaucon and his friends are saying like, no one wants to live there. I mean, imagine some of you are probably like, it sounds really great, right? But now take away your comfortable bed, take away your iPhone, your smartphone, take away your various devices you're used to, and the sort of technological infrastructure and the media structure that goes along with your life, like as it is, right? Or even that I'm doing this this video and putting it up for you to like access it, right? Now there's certainly a cost to be paid for that, and in many ways this course is sort of building towards that argument as we work towards reading Nietzsche and Heidegger and such. But for now, think of everything that you'd have to give up, and would you be prepared to exist that way? And probably a lot of people won't, and Glaucon's pointing that out, that there's just so many things that we're used to having, dietary things that we like to eat, and certain like hobbies we like to do, and then other things that we feel are just sort of essential to a human life. Whether or not they are, that's perhaps a separate but necessary conversation that we'll have in time. Anyways, he says here, I believe the city I have just described, the city of necessity, is well-founded and that will prove to be robust. But if you want to examine a city in a state of fever, hence the name, the feverish city for that city of luxury, we can do that too. It is in any case evident that many will not be contented with the simple fare and simple ways of that other city. They'll want couches and tables and other types of furniture, sweets and perfumes, incense, courtesans, and cakes, right? And all must be furnished in quantity and variety, and we must go beyond clothing, shoes, houses, and other necessities I spoke of at first. There'll be painting and embroidery, gold and ivory sought as ornamentation. He says true, right? So again, think about all the different things that we're used to having and that we want to acquire, that we want to like spend our time with, and our money on, all that kind of stuff. Then we must further enlarge our city, the well-founded city of necessity. Again, argument can be made that that's really where the just city is. We started with will no longer be big enough. It must be extended and filled up with superfluities. There will, of course, be hunters aplenty, imitators, right? So artists. Others will make music, poets, their attendants, rhapsodizers, players, dancers, impresarios. Market for greater variety of goods. Stylish women will want dressmakers and more servants. Will not tutors be in demand? Along with wet nurses and dry nurses, barbers, beauticians, cooks, bakers, swineherds. There was no need for swineherds in the original city, but because there weren't any pigs. Now, however, we'll need pigs, as well as other kinds of animals for those who wish to eat them. And then the next thing he says is we'll also need more doctors, right? So like as soon as we recognize we're going to want pigs, we're going to need more doctors because like everybody's going to have like more health issues, right? Just meaning that this more extravagant city that people find desirable, I would argue, and I think that Socrates seems to also be suggesting this, while in some ways it's, quote, more realistic, we've left the easier possibility of the just city behind because people would have difficulty adjusting to it, and so we need to think of an ideal city that's also a luxurious city so that people will be like interested in living there. So we have to expand it. It's got to like become bigger. We need more professions so we can offer all the varieties of life and lifestyle that people are going to want. He says this way of life requires more doctors. Okay, and we're on page 69. He says, must we also assume that the territory, which was at one time sufficient to feed the city, will no longer be adequate? So it's got to like literally occupy more land. It says, yes, we shall. So we shall covet some of our neighbor's land in order to expand our pasture and tillage. And if our neighbor has also disregarded the limits set by necessity, like the other city, and has given himself over to the unlimited acquisition of wealth, that's an important phrase here, he will in turn covet what belongs to us, inevitably. Then the next step will be war, Glaucon. Or do you see some other outcome? There can be no other, Socrates. So they locate the origin of war, right? So not conflict as such, not people disagreeing and not even like, violence or death, but war as a sort of interstate, necessity, something that happens. It arises because people do not live in accordance with necessity, but of luxury. And they want more than they need. And so then they go and they take it where it exists, right? And this is really important because it sort of tells us that the only reason that war exists is for something like greed and insatiable desires, and that it could go away. Again, not all conflict, not all violence, not everything bad, but war as happening between states, right? Now, if you remember, we agreed to the principle that everybody has like one job, right? So if we stick to that principle, because this is what allows them to like do that job well and contribute most to that society and for society to run, efficiently and hopefully justly, that now that we have this new phenomenon or this new, state institution of war, this means that we need a new profession, right? And what's this new profession or vocation? It's the war makers. And so now the idea of a guardian class is what they're referred to here, is introduced. And these are the people that are going to wage war, right? And they also will occupy the place in this society of sort of acting as like both police and soldier, as it were. Now, what's really interesting about this is that we find that these are going to be people who will represent what's best about us. Now, think about, and I want to be a little sensitive here, but think about our stereotypes when it comes to like policemen and soldiers, right? And obviously, a stereotype's only worth what it's worth, and it's often not very helpful. But the idea is that I think it's fair to say that we don't always associate with those vocations, the most educated or the most empathetic. That in many ways, in order to perform that particular function, there's certain things that we look for, and other things that we're not overly concerned with, right? Soldiers need to be able to follow orders, right? They need to be in good, physical condition, and something somewhat similar to policemen, though perhaps a level of judiciousness is something that we've come to expect, right? And rightfully so. But here, what they're going to make the argument is that these guardians, right, these sort of soldier policeman figures in society, now that we need them, right, they are going to have to be the most well educated of everyone in the city, and they're in fact going to be the sort of group or class of people within society that the rulers will emerge out of. We don't just want those that are physically most fit or capable for the job, but sort of emotionally and intellectually most fit for the job, right? Yeah, and there's some really interesting things that they're going to get into here. Let's just take a quick look at a few of them. Go to page 70. At the bottom of page 70, he says, "I mean that each being of these guardians, they must be keen in perceiving the enemy." So keen, that's an attribute. Swift in pursuit and capture, so like fast, right? And strong, he must then so that he can subdue the enemy, right? So those are like some of the physical qualifications. Then at the top of 71, in order to fight well, each must be brave, as well as strong, right? So now we want bravery and bravery. So this other quality, and they go on to sort of unpack that a little bit. They associate bravery with a high spiritedness that if it's not if it's not honed and trained, then high spiritedness is just sort of like that natural aggression that some people have, and I'm sure you've maybe met people that just are like amped up, and it's not really all that nice to run across when you run across such people. But if people can hone it and turn it into like a something like bravery, that it can be applied when it's appropriate, then this is going to be of use to them. But you need that base level of like an animated spirit that's got that sort of drive to to act towards adversity or opponents or whatever that they're looking for that too. So the physical qualities, the bravery. Um, and then if we go to page 72, we see, does it also seem to you that the guardian should have another quality in addition to that of spirit? Should he not be a philosopher, right? The philosopher, and they lay this out very explicitly in the middle of the page on 72, needs to be, it's like a love of wisdom, right? That these aren't just people that are following orders. They aren't just people who know how to fight and are ready to fight. That these are people that know when to fight and why to fight. They know when to apply the law and how to apply the law, right? And this is so important, right? It's a lesson that that we can learn to this day. I mean, I think that we would all, if I can say, wouldn't we all benefit greatly if the people that were invested with great power and authority to execute the laws, to enforce the laws, had a great degree of wisdom about that, a great degree of understanding, right? I mean that seems clear at this point, right? Especially what's going on in our society today. Um, Now, at the bottom of page 72, it says this: I suggest we proceed with our guardians' education in a spirit of leisure, right? This is, for those that don't know, the ancient Greek word for leisure is where we get our word for school. Think about how different that is. That this notion of scholia, which for Greeks is a life affirming leisurely activity in which some of the most important stuff occurs, but it's not compulsed. It's a free activity. That has become for us compulsory schooling, or schooling that's only associated with like a certain societal function, right? And it's serving that role here as well. But in order for it to work, it has to proceed in the spirit of leisure. It has to sort of have this life affirming, partly contemplative, um, dealing with various aspects of culture and all that kind of stuff. He says here, we'll tell tales and recount fables that will serve to educate them. At the top of 73, this means they're going to be educated in gymnastics for the body and music for the soul. And as we've already seen, music plays a large part in the philosophy of Plato, at least in terms of using it as an analogy, but also it has a real position in the philosophy. But, gymnastics, in this broad sense of like physical education, not just specific gymnastics as we think about it, but the gym, strength training and agility and all that kind of stuff, wrestling, all that kind of stuff. That's going to be a big part of their education. But before they're even physically able to do that, we can tell them stories, right? Stories that nourish the soul, that teach them about how a person should be in society, teaches them right and wrong. We can play music for them, right? Poetry and music, and these things are nourishments to the psyche, to the soul, so that they can grow into the people that we want them to be. And I'm gonna end on this point, and this is gonna be really interesting because it's gonna get into some I think some challenging stuff for you to think about censorship and all that kind of stuff. But for now, we're going to end it with this. It's the middle of page 73. It says, then you'll understand that the most important part of any work is its beginning. This is especially true for the children, for the education of children. At the tender age they are, At this tender age, they are the most impressionable and therefore most likely to adopt any and all modes set before them. The most important part of any work is the beginning. So, in a certain sense, he means, well, specifically children. And so the stuff that happens early on is very formative, right? And we can see this with negative examples with, like, trauma, right? And how that ends up, dictating so much about our life and sort of controlling us. And so we have to like deal with that. But also in a sense of like positive examples of, you know, being read to and being loved and sort of shown the way that one should go, right? So that's super important for future possibilities of what we can be and how we can be. And it's also probably a broader principle that the beginning of anything, not just children and education, but of anything, sort of sets the parameters. It sets out the limits and possibilities of what a thing can be. Think of like an acorn, right? At the beginning of something. That the acorn does not have the teleological possibility. It doesn't have the aim or goal possibility of being an elephant. I know that sounds absurd, but follow along. That it has certain things that it can be and become that are set there at the beginning, and also things that it can't be. So too with us, but there's more flexibility because of the phenomenon of consciousness and this like the nature of the psyche, the soul. That these things have to sort of be directed, awakened, elicited, cultivated, etc., etc. And so they're going to think about what role poetry, storytelling, music, the transmission of culture and its values, the role that it plays in people, in young people, into what they can become and what they hope that they would become. Specifically with the guardian class, because we're investing them with so much authority and power, but also too just with everyone. So we'll go ahead and pause there for now. I'll probably do one more video for book 2 and get in. We'll start with some of that censorship stuff and see where it goes. Okay, see you soon.